This edition of News from Poland Business and Law is focusing on implementing diversity and inclusion policies in companies. The subject will be presented by Filip Rak, an advocate, associate in the business crime and litigation practice at Wardyński & Partners. Then, in a few sentences, I will tell you about the current economic situation in Poland. We are making this program for foreigners, acting as board members in Polish companies, foreign investors in Poland, and their foreign advisors.
Individuality, human diversity. This is something that every organization thrives on. We differ in how we perceive the world, our individual experience, background, and a myriad of other individual features. Building an inclusivity culture means embracing our differences and different needs and reflecting them in the life of the organization. In this episode, I will try to explain what a diversity and inclusion, or D&I policy, is within an organization, what measures the existing law requires, and where there is room to take measures above and beyond what is required. I will also discuss the areas where firms can anticipate new obligations in line with the current regulatory trends. No doubt a game changer will be the EU's proposed directive on corporate sustainability due diligence, presented in February 2022 by the European Commission. The proposal would impose obligations on the biggest companies in the area of human rights and environmental due diligence across all the operations of the company and its subsidiaries. It seems inevitable that the European Union will adopt the rules set forth in the proposal for this directive. That's why it's worth preparing now for the upcoming changes and introducing inclusivity into the company's business model. A D&I policy applies across the board at an organization. The D&I policy is aimed at ensuring equal treatment and responding to the different needs not only of employees but of all stakeholders, customers, and other communities at least potentially impacted by the company's actions. A D&I policy will shape the internal rules for functioning of the firm, as well as its external relations, including the rules for delivering goods and services, ensuring equal treatment of all persons, particularly vulnerable groups. Laws existing in most European countries already require D&I measures to some extent. In particular, legal duties involve rules prohibiting discrimination in employment and combating mobbing or a hostile working environment. Employers are required to introduce these rules under national labor law and anti-discrimination regulations implementing EU law. It is worthwhile for every organization, particularly large ones, to adopt a written anti-discrimination policy, defining discrimination and creating mechanisms for combating it. The lack of identified risks and procedures can lead to legal consequences. For example, the Supreme Court of Poland is currently considering the case of an employer that refused to allow a transgender woman in the process of transition from using a female name at work, and ordered her to wear masculine clothing on the job. The employee appealed to the court, which found that the employer had infringed her gender identity, committing prohibited discrimination against her. This case shows that it is worthwhile to identify the areas in the company's operations where there is a risk of unequal treatment, and then to adopt appropriate procedures to combat these risks. The proposal for the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive adopted by the European Commission would greatly expand the duties of the biggest companies in this area. The duty to comply with the policy of respect for human rights under the proposal would apply not only to employment, but to all aspects of the operations of the company and all its stakeholders, including customers and business relationships across all value chains. Big companies will have to identify the areas where their operations might infringe the law. If the analysis shows that the company's operations could result in discrimination against certain groups, the company will have to introduce appropriate remedial measures. But not all measures that can be taken to promote diversity are expressly required by law. To reinforce the diversity culture within the organization, a range of soft measures can also be followed. These include, for example, building inclusive language into the company's internal and external communications and strengthening infrastructure accessible to persons with disabilities. This also means encouraging management to absorb diversity from colleagues and staff. This can be furthered by such initiatives as reversed mentoring and creation of employee resource groups. More and more companies are introducing their own diversity and inclusion solutions to ensure the well-being of their own employees and promote their potential to meet the needs of all groups of stakeholders affected by the company's operations and to reduce the legal risk of infringing their rights. Research also shows that customers place greater and greater weight on whether the companies they deal with include a D&I policy in their operations and would rather buy goods and services from companies with such policy in place. So, there's no need to wait for legal changes. Instead, consider introducing a diversity and inclusion policy at your organization today. Thanks for watching.
We now have the lowest unemployment in 30 years and record high revenues of enterprises. The Polish government has decided that from July 2023, the minimum wage will be 20% higher than at present. The Prime Minister optimistically announced that Poland is no longer competing for investors with other countries through low wages, but is starting to do so with increasingly better technologies and work productivity. However, there are already signs of a downturn caused by high inflation of almost 16%. It was triggered by increased consumer demand after the pandemic, spikes in energy and raw materials prices due to the war in Ukraine, rising labor costs and prolonged disruptions in supply chains following the pandemic. A negative view is beginning to prevail among entrepreneurs because high inflation in Poland and Western European countries is reducing the purchasing power of consumers. This will in turn reduce the demand for Polish products and threatens to reduce profits and make employees redundant. Thank you for watching this episode. See you soon.